It was already quite late when I saw him sitting on the sofa, with a slight movement of his wrist, first using non-verbal communication with a fabric that had a thick texture. Meanwhile, on the television, a film was playing of a beautiful, smiling girl who was wearing a piece of clothing similar to those worn by Indians, who was constantly moving up and down on a piece of wood. I remember that day very well. My name is Emily. I am 28 years old and I live in the beating heart of one of the largest metropolises in the world, the ever-living and frenetic New York. Here, time never stops. The streets are a tangle of stories that intersect, faces in a hurry that barely look at each other, car horns that give no respite. In the midst of this organized chaos, my own story unfolds, inside a small apartment in Brooklyn, where I share my life with someone who has become much more than just a friend. Michael has always been by my side. Ever since my mother passed away in that tragic accident, he has become a pillar in my life, a safe haven in the midst of the storm of grief. What was once just a friendship grew into something stronger, a silent bond of complicity and protection. He also lost someone very important, Sarah, his wife. Since then, the pain has lived inside him, discreetly but always present. A silent mourning, a wound that has never completely healed. Life, unexpectedly, brought us side by side. He with his spacious and always impeccable apartment, and I, trying to rebuild myself just below, in the same building. At first, it was just casual company, occasional encounters in the hallway, exchanges of looks filled with understanding. But over time, we became more than neighbors. We became allies, accomplices in the daily struggle to move forward, even when the past insisted on pulling us back. Michael was not one to talk about his feelings. He kept them to himself, carrying a look that said more than any words. A look of longing, of memories that hurt, of a love that still echoed within him. And I respected that. I never pressured him, never demanded that he share his pain with me. But I felt it. I felt it in every prolonged silence, in every forced smile, in every time he lost himself in distant thoughts. Lately, however, there was something different. I noticed it in his posture, in the way he sank into the couch after a long day of work. Michael is a systems analyst and spends hours in front of a screen, immersed in codes and numbers. But the exhaustion I saw in him went beyond the physical. It was something deeper, as if loneliness was finally winning the battle. On that stifling afternoon, when the heat seemed to melt even the asphalt, I arrived home and found him there, sitting on the couch, staring into space. The air conditioning hummed softly, but the feeling of suffocation didn't come from the heat. It came from the invisible weight that hung over him. "Is everything okay?" I asked, dropping my backpack on the armchair. Michael took a while to answer. His fingers were clasped nervously on his lap, his eyes fixed on some undefined point on the wall. Then, finally, he sighed. A deep, heavy sigh, as if he were lifting a weight off his chest. "Not exactly, Emily," he said, his voice hoarse and tired. "I've been thinking a lot about my life. And I don't know how to move on without Sarah. It seems like it gets harder every day." My heart sank. I could already imagine it, but hearing those words so raw hurt. I wanted to say something that would ease his pain, that would make him feel less alone. But sometimes silence speaks volumes too. And in that moment, just being there, just listening, was already a gesture of love and understanding. It was then that I understood how much he needed someone, not just a shoulder to cry on, but also an empathy that I might not have shown yet. I felt that, somehow, I could be the right person to help, even if I didn't know exactly how. We tried to maintain a healthy routine in the apartment. I studied and worked part-time at a coffee shop, while he spent hours working from home. Usually, it was time to check in on each other's day, but in the last few weeks he would stay in his room, doors closed, and I could barely get a good night out of him. The sight of him sitting on the couch, with a blank look in his eyes, was the trigger for me to take action. "Michael, how about you take a break from work? Go for a walk on Fifth Avenue, have a coffee in a new place? I don't know, change the scenery a little." He looked at me as if he didn't understand the suggestion. "What's the point of going out, Emily? It would just be more of the same. Who wants to walk through that chaotic traffic?" I couldn't help but smile. He sounded like a grumpy old man, but I knew it was a defense mechanism. That's exactly why we need to go out, to clear our heads, to experience life outside. Since I didn't want to force him to do anything, I respected his pace. However, an idea occurred to me. I could bring the world to him. That night, I bought some different ingredients on my way home from work and made a dish I'd never tried before. I decided that, to break the monotony, I needed to try new recipes, new flavors, and, by extension, make him try them too. When I served the food, Michael gave a small smile. "This is different. At least it's colorful and smells good." We laughed together, and it was the first time in weeks that I felt some enthusiasm in his voice, as if a breath of life had come through the window along with the night breeze. It was on the second bite that he made a comment that made me see his true state. "You know, Emily, sometimes I think I'm no good for anything anymore. I lost the woman I loved and I have no idea how to rebuild what's left of me." His sincerity touched me deeply. For the first time, I understood how great a burden he was carrying. I threw down my silverware and, on impulse, put my hand over his. "Michael, there are things we can't control. It's part of life. And as long as I'm alive, there's a way to find meaning." We looked at each other in silence for a few seconds. The sound of the cars passing by on the street outside seemed distant, as if that small apartment had become a world apart, where two people tried to understand and support each other. The hope of a new beginning. After that conversation, I made a decision. I would try, in my own way, to pull Michael out of that hole he was sinking into. And he, it seemed, let that possibility in, even if it was just a crack of light. I had no idea how, but I wanted to try too. Little by little, I managed to persuade Michael to leave the house for more than a few minutes, to go to the grocery store or take care of something for work. We started with a walk through Central Park on a Sunday morning. It was crowded as always, but there was a vibrant atmosphere that contrasted with the silence of our apartment. "Thanks for getting me out of the house, Emily," he said as he bought a coconut water from a street vendor. I nodded, sipping my juice, feeling a simple joy at seeing a sparkle in his eyes. That was when he whispered, a little awkwardly, "You make me feel good." As the days went by, something started to change in the atmosphere of the apartment. Our conversations went beyond just, "What are we going to eat today?" He told me more about the wife he had lost, about how much he still missed her, but also about how he realized that life had to go on. One afternoon, while I was cooking and he was washing the dishes, our hands met by chance at the faucet. "I'm sorry, it's just," he started to say and stopped. "No, you don't have to apologize. I understand what you're going through." Later, he watched a movie very quietly in the living room. I believe he did it so as not to disturb anyone. Meanwhile, I was sitting in the kitchen, playing with my cell phone for about an hour. I decided to go see if he was okay, and to my surprise, I saw a different movie than usual on TV. I watched from afar how much he needed help. The slight movements he used with his wrist, something I had never seen up close before, aroused my curiosity. In order to bring peace to that moment, I got slightly closer to the couch, with my hands on my knees. He smiled, as if the world had become calmer for him. I felt I needed to help him. Whether it was right or not, I did. Would you like to have more real entertainment? I asked almost in a whisper. I was afraid of confusing gratitude with another feeling, and I also didn't want to disturb Sarah's memory. But Michael seemed to read my thoughts, as he shook his head slightly, in a non-verbal communication. I managed to translate ball and cat into English, a unique and happy moment that I spent an hour. At that time, there was only the low sound of the television, in an entertainment of happy people who were able to enjoy the best of life. The experience he had was so that his tool could enter calmly and serve me. After that, I got up from the couch and went to rest. I had done a good job.